Hello, my darlings. Today is Tuesday, November 2nd, and as you can see, I'm not there. But your sub today is Mr. Baker, and he used to be a math teacher, so he can help you with any questions that you might have. We're going to do the same lesson that we would have normally done if I was there. You're just going to watch it on Edpuzzle instead of watching me do it in class. And then if you run into any questions as you're watching the Edpuzzle, or if you're stuck on anything when you're doing your Math Excel homework, you can ask Mr. Baker and he can help you out. I promise he knows how to do this stuff. So let's take a look at what's on the agenda for today. We're going to learn about slope-intercept form today. There's two things that I need you to learn how to do in this lesson. The first one is to take the equation of a line and use it to draw a graph. And the second one is to look at a graph and use it to write the equation of a line. So we're just kind of going backwards from the first one. I'm going to do the lesson in two parts just so the videos don't get so long. So you're going to watch this first video and then you can take a little break if you need to go get a drink of water or something, stretch, whatever, and watch the second video. Then after that, you will have some time to work in class. Don't forget, we're looking at a quiz coming up a week from today over the stuff that we learned this week, and also including the slope lesson that we had last week. And as always, you had homework due last night. You will have another homework assignment after today's lesson that will be due on Thursday night at midnight. And you also have a Delta Math assignment due on Friday, just like every Friday. So let's jump into your notes. Now, I understand that it's difficult to take notes and watch an Edpuzzle video at the same time, so it's all right with me if you don't take notes on this one. For that reason, I'm going to put my completed notes in your notes folder for you. So you'll have all of this filled out to go back and look at if you need it later. If you want to take notes, that's perfectly fine. You'll have a blank one there to take notes on as well. But for today, my recommendation is just to watch the video and then go back to the notes if you really feel like you need to after this. So I'm going to switch my camera off so you guys don't have to look at my nose while I'm writing on my screen, and then we'll get into this. In this first part of the lesson, we're going to be focused on this first skill, how to graph a line in slope-intercept form. We're going to go way back to old school graphing techniques, like when you were first learning what graphs are back in probably about 6th grade. And back then, the strategy would have been to make a t-table with an x and a y. We're going to plug in numbers for x and get values for y and plot those things as ordered pairs. The first thing I always choose is 0. That's the easiest number to plug in every time. So if we're plugging in 0, then that just means right here in that spot, we're going to put a 0. It's going to say 4/5 times 0 plus 2. Now 4/5 times 0, that's 0. So this just becomes 0 plus 2, and the answer is 2. So now that turns into an ordered pair, 0, 2. And that's a point on our graph right there. Let's do the same thing with another number. We want to be strategic as we're picking values for x, because I know that whatever number I pick next, I'm going to have to take 4/5 times that number and then add 2. And I don't really like fractions, so I'm going to choose a number that will give me a result that's not a fraction anymore. And the key is to pick the denominator. So my plan this time is to choose 5 for my next number. Plug in 5, and not -5, just 5. Plug in 5 and see what we get. So 4/5 times 5, that's 4. This just says 4 plus 2, that gives me 6. So now I have the ordered pair 5, 6, and I can graph that over 5, up 6, and there's my next point right there. Let's do one more. Now, by the same strategy, I could plug in -5, and that would also not give me a fraction when I multiply by 4/5. So I could do 4/5 times -5 plus 2. That gives me -4 plus 2, -2. So here's my next ordered pair, -5, comma, -2. Back 5, down 2, there we go. And then let's draw a line. And that's what this line would look like if we graphed it. Now, our ultimate goal here is going to be to do all of this without making that t-table. So let's back up a little bit and say we didn't do any of this stuff, and we still want to be able to draw this line. Now, some of this I'm going to do the same thing just in my head. And for some of it, I'm going to use the stuff we learned last week about slope. So the first thing I want to do is plug in 0, because like we said, 0 is just an easy thing to plug in. If I plug in 0 here, then I recognize it's going to cancel out that first term altogether, and I'm going to get 2 as a result. So whatever number is in this spot, that's the number I'm going to get when I plug in 0. And that's what makes this so easy. So I'm going to give myself just one ordered pair. It's going to be the ordered pair that is the result when I plug in 0. So I'm going to start there. So we're pretending that we don't have this line yet. All we have is that first point, 0, 2. And then my strategy is going to be, instead of building a t-table and adding a bunch of numbers to it, I want to start at that point and just think about what my slope is and my rise and run to get my next point. So in this case, my slope is 4/5. And that tells me I'm going to have a rise 4 and a run 5. So from this first point that I put on my graph, I'm going to go up 4 over 5, and that's where my next point will be. And then I can draw my line. We can also think about this as like a -4 over -5 slope. So I can say my rise, let's not even call it rise, let's just call it down 4 and back 5 if both of them are negative. So I'm going to go down 4, back 5, and that's where my next point will be. And that should look familiar. Those are the same places we put the points when we did this with a t-table. But this is something we can do without all the work of a t-table. So then we can get our ruler back and we can draw our line, and it ends up being the same exact line. Now let's practice that some more. In this situation, we have a -3/4 x minus 5. So I'm going to say my slope is -3/4. Now my advice is decide which of those numbers you want to put the negative sign on. So you could call this a -3 over +4, and that will mean down 3 and then run 4. Or you could call this a +3 over -4, which will mean rise 3 and then go back 4. Now let's see what that looks like. We need a starting place before we can do any of that. And that's what this other number tells us. That number right there, that's the number you get when you plug in 0. So let's imagine we plugged in 0, -3/4 times 0 minus 5 gives me -5. Because -3/4 times 0, that's just 0. So if I put in a 0 for x, I'm getting a -5 for y. So this point, 0, -5, that's my starting place. That's this point right here. From there, I can count my slope. I know this is a negative slope, so I'm expecting a line that goes downhill from left to right. And that's just important to sort of keep in mind. Make sure you're going the right direction. I'm going to go down 3 and then forward 4. Or you could go like this, rise 3, back 4. 1, 2, 3, and back 1, 2, 3, 4. And I could do that again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I recommend putting as many dots on there as you have space for before you run out of squares on the grid. And then grab your ruler and draw a line. And that's the line that we were trying to graph in the first place. So the process here is to first find a starting point. And the starting point is always what you get when you plug in 0. Put 0 in for x, and then the result will be a y value that really is just that second number. That's your y value when you plug in 0 for x. So you're going to have 0, comma, that number. That'll be your starting point. And then from there, you count your rise and run and see what happens. Brings us to some more formal information about slope-intercept form. Now, we kind of already knew that the m number gives you your slope. We talked about that in the last section of notes last week. What we haven't talked about yet is this number. We kind of talked about it just now and said this is going to be your starting point. This is what you get when you plug 0 in for x, and that's going to be the first point you put on your graph. We want to be just a little bit more formal here. The official name for this number is your y-intercept. So that value of b gives you the y value where the graph crosses the y-axis. That's why it's called the y-intercept. This is also the y value that you get when you plug 0 in for x. And this is what we've been doing so far. Plug in 0 for x and see what you get. It's always going to be that number right there. As an ordered pair, we write this as parentheses 0, comma, whatever that number is. And that's the first thing you put on the graph. If you can get 1 point on the graph to start with, then from there, all you have to do is count rise and run with your slope in order to get a bunch more points and draw your line. So let's look at a couple of examples and see if we can identify the slope and the y-intercept. Now, if the slope-intercept form of an equation is y equals mx plus b, then as long as you can get your equation into this kind of form where you have y on one side all by itself and then a number times x plus b, then whatever number comes in front of the x, that's always going to be your slope. But whatever number is off by itself without the x, that's always going to be your b number or your y-intercept. Now, this is something that we did last time, finding the slope. We can say m, that's the number in front of the x. Check to make sure you've got it in the right form. It says y equals, so we're good. The number in front of the x, that'll be your slope. And then b, that's your y-intercept. That's this number. Now, I caution you not to say the slope is the first number, the y-intercept is the second number, because you could switch those two things around, and you could write this as y equals 1 plus 2x, and then that statement's not true anymore. So the slope is always the number in front of the x, and the y-intercept is always the constant term. Let's look at the next one. Y equals negative 1/2 x minus 9. So this is in our y equals mx plus b form. We want to identify the slope and the y-intercept. What do you think the slope is? In this case, the slope is the number in front of the x, including that negative sign. So don't forget the negative. The slope is negative 1/2. Now take another look and tell me, what do you think the y-intercept is? As always, the y-intercept is this number that's all by itself, but if there's a minus sign, it needs to stick with that number. So the y-intercept is negative 9, not just 9. Now let's look at some practice before we move on to our next topic. Good old Delta Math has some practice for us. You can expect to see these in your Delta Math assignments in the future. This one says graph the line with the equation y equals 6x minus 1. So we first want to identify what's our slope and what's our y-intercept. First of all, what do you think the y-intercept is? That's always going to be our starting point. The y-intercept in this case is negative 1. Remember, if there's a minus sign, it needs to stick with the number after it. So we're going to start at the ordered pair 0, -1, and that's at this point right here. From there, we look at our slope. Now take a second. What do you think the slope is? The slope of this line is 6. So that means we're going to go up 6 and over 1. And I'm counting from my starting point. So from this y-intercept point that I put on here, I'm going to go up 6 units from there and over 1 unit from there. Now, if I had to, I could go up 6 over 1 again, up 6 over 1 again. It would go way off the graph. I could also go down 6, back 1, and put another point there that would also be on this line. In Delta Math and also in MathXL, you're only going to need 2 points in order to have the equation of a line. So let's see if that one works. Yes, it does. Let's do another one like that. Take a second to decide, what do you think is the slope? What do you think is the y-intercept? So my y-intercept is this -3. So that tells me where to put my first point. Remember, even though the slope comes first in the equation, it's not the first thing we deal with when we're graphing. The first thing you deal with when you're graphing is the y-intercept. So I'm going to put my first point where? My first point at 0, -3. And from there, I can count my slope as rise and run. So my slope is -2/5. So that means I'm going to have a rise of -2. I'm going to go down 2. And a run of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, take a step back and look at that and say, is it a downhill line? Because it's supposed to be, because my slope is negative. If you got an uphill line, that means you're going the wrong direction with either your rise or your run. We could go down and forward, or we could go up and backward. Either one would be fine. So say I wanted to get rid of this, and instead of putting my next point there, I want to go up 2, back 5. That gets me the same exact line, and it's still going to be a correct answer when I check it. Let's do one more problem like this. What's the first point that I should put on this line? My first point will be at 0, -3. From there, I'm going to count my slope. What is the slope of this line? Now, we always say the slope is the number in front of the x, but in this situation, there isn't a number in front of the x, so we have to sort of imagine, what does that mean? If there's no number written there in front of the x, that really means 1x, right? So this is a slope of 1. If you're going to write it as a fraction, it's 1 over 1. We're going up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And this is the line that I'm going to try to draw. Now, it does not matter if I put my point right here, or if I go up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1 a whole bunch of times and put my point there. It's all the same line. I could also go down 1, back 1, down 1, back 1, put a point there. That's all the same line. So it doesn't matter where you put that second point, as long as it is some iteration of this up 1 over 1 situation. Let's see, check our answer. There we go. MathXL has problems a lot like this, and so you'll be doing the same kind of process in MathXL for your homework tonight. Back to our notes in OneNote. The next thing we're going to do is look at a graph that's already there and pull information out of it to try to write the equation. We're already at almost 20 minutes here, so I'm going to do this one in a different video. So if you need to take a break, stretch your legs, whatever you need to do, only one person going to the bathroom at a time, but go ahead and take a little break for yourself here and then watch the second.